Hello Belinda, it's Chris. Welcome to my parlour and your past life reading. Now you want to know a very specific lifetime, whether or not you were known to Lady Jane Seymour. Perhaps were you Lady Jane Seymour? Were you in the court of King Henry VIII at the time of Jane Seymour, who was a very interesting woman? There's a lot of speculation about her, whether or not she was the quiet, timid woman she was portrayed to be, or was she quite aggressive in her pursuit of King Henry VIII, whether or not it was her own personal reasons or her family's aspirations to raise themselves in society. It was an interesting concept, isn't it? And of course she was the only queen of King Henry VIII, his wife, who bore him an heir, a son. So unfortunately she didn't live much longer past that, and again there was speculation about how her death came about. So did you know Lady Jane Seymour in a past life? I have not done a specific person as yet in these readings, so it'll be interesting to find out whether or not that comes up in your past life, because these are usually past lives that relate to now. So let's have a look and find out, shall we, if we can find out any information about that. Timing, of course, we know now that you want the Tudor times, so I'm not going to worry about timing because it's going to be covered in the Tudor times. So who were you? Were you related in some aspect to Lady Jane Seymour? So I'm going to ask that question of the cards. Is there a connection with Lady Jane Seymour? For Belinda, please. Is there a connection with Lady Jane Seymour? For Belinda, please. Was there a connection? I'm not too sure if they can answer that specifically, but we'll give it a go. So, is there a connection with Lady Jane Seymour? For Belinda, please. Cut it? No, I'll just take it from the top. Ten of Swords, Judgment. This is Ten of Spades here, which is the Ten of Swords. The beginning of the end. Judgment comes through here. I'm not sensing a direct connection, but it certainly comes through as a beginning of an end. Lady Jane Seymour. Let's find out who you were and whether or not, because the swords usually indicate a no in question wise. But you've got the Judgment and a woman here. So who were you, perhaps? In relation to Jane Seymour, who was Belinda? In relation to Jane Seymour, who was Belinda? Lady Jane Seymour, on all accounts, didn't create chaos within the King Henry VIII's court. She was considered quite, a good influence. She was, however, connected to both King Henry VIII's first two wives. She was lady-in-waiting to both. One, and then she brought on to the other, and she sort of progressed up the ladder, or progressed up the steps here to a social standing of his third wife. So, but apparently she was his preferred wife, because I think she bore him a son, an heir. So she did raise in expectation. She went from bottom to the top rung. So in a way, this could be indicating that there was a connection here, but not with you personally, perhaps, or perhaps you were Lady Jane Seymour. Let's find out who you were in relation to Lady Jane Seymour. An influential man. An influential man. There was quite a few men in court. Were you within the court of King Henry VIII? You were an influential man. There's no indication that she had lovers or any other involvement with any other man beside King Henry, but you could have been her father, for example. He was very influential in the court and had cause to want to rise in social standing. So perhaps you could have been Lady Jane Seymour's father, or someone else within court who was very important at that time. So there may have been a connection of some sort. Let's have a look and see what might have been important in your life at that time, being either one or the other perhaps, but definitely I'm not sensing that you were an important part of Jane Seymour's life perhaps, but certainly beginning and the end. So did King Henry take notice of Lady Jane Seymour? It's been said that he didn't actually take much notice of her until he came to her residence at one time or another and met her in her own environment, away from the court and away from other distractions. So perhaps this coming through here, you were definitely a man of influence in the King Henry's court. Were you direct influence into a bit of a burden here, a bit of a burden, just flipped over, burden comes through here. So getting into King Henry VIII's favour would have been quite a burden for any woman at that time. He chopped off the head of Anne Boleyn, so that didn't seem to stop Jane Seymour for wanting to be the next queen, because he didn't have a reputation then, did he, of a head chopper. So, but it would have been a burden on anyone's front to be part of that court. So it would have been perhaps a burden for you at that time as well. Do you have a burden at the moment, Belinda? Trying to be noticed, trying to get into a social standing, or rising in the corporate ladder, for example, in employment, or trying to get into a social group, seems to be coming through here. You have influence perhaps, but have you got enough of an influence to be seen and to make a stand and to be what you aspire to be, which is coming through here as well. You were a very influential man at the time, but how much power did you have? How much of a voice in the ear of those in charge did you have at the moment? And also too, it would have been the time of that you may have said the wrong thing at the wrong time and been beheaded by King Henry, because he wasn't, he had aspirations too to be bigger and better than what he was. Did you whisper at King Henry's ear that you wanted your daughter to be seen in court? Was she Lady Jane Seymour? What else has been important for you at that time? Enemies. Yes, you could have, well, in the Tudor times, you know, you could have been anyone's enemy, and you could just potentially have enemies just because you were an influential person. So you did have enemies. Perhaps did you conspire to keep Lady Jane Seymour out of court and produce your own? There's a release here, like judgment is a release. So you probably did live much longer than Jane Seymour herself. Judgment, again, it comes as a release. It's calling through destiny. It's calling through to follow a destiny journey on your soul. So there was a commitment. So perhaps there was a marriage made, a commitment made by you. King Henry didn't marry for 2 years after Jane Seymour died, but he did have a mistress between Jane Seymour's death and a new wife. So perhaps there lots of intrigue going on through that court there, and bringing up a lot of enemies, which is interesting. So what commitment are you making at the moment, and do you find a rival for that commitment? Is there, like in work for example, is there a position going and there's several people applying for it? How much do you put in store for that? It's like it's been calling you, it's part of your destiny to have this, but there are those who also want it. So there's a bit of a struggle now to be seen for those that matter, for the people that matter, that will be part of the process. So so it could all come down to that sort of thing, doesn't it? This is very similar to the Tudor times, when you had to be seen, you had to make sure you were seen, become an important part of the court. So how are you placing yourself in whatever it is you're pursuing at the moment? How are you seen? Jane Seymour apparently was very different from anyone else in court. She sort of became a stabilising factor and didn't make waves, what I understand. That doesn't mean that she didn't. That's all part of the plan, perhaps. She sort of saw what was going on in court and found her own way of gaining favour. So maybe it's something that you might need to consider, doing it your way rather than the way it's always been, and sort of make your own mark. Jane Seymour certainly did, with the influence of another person, influence of someone who's a mentor, or in this case perhaps her father, or a man that has a word in the ear of King Henry, a consort of some sort. Definitely a commitment there, and a commitment now, and the release and judgment come together as part of destiny. That this is what needs to happen. It's like making history. It needs to happen. It's always going to, it always will be, and always was a fixed point in time, as it would be in Doctor Who terms. It's always coming around, back round to this. And you can't change history, but you can make a new future. You can make steps towards making a different set of circumstances now. So in the future, it's not written yet. So the past is not written yet. If you know what I mean, you make your own. What we do now makes the past. Does that make sense? Especially if it's been written that this is what's going to happen, then it will happen. But how it happens and what transpires from the moment it happens is entirely up to us right now to make the past. Does that make sense? It's rather confusing, isn't it? If you think about it, it sort of was interesting to think about, that we are making the past right now, right this moment, and you are certainly making the past right now with this next set of things that you'll be doing. Jane Seymour made choices. She made the right ones. She became the third wife of King Henry VIII. And had she not died after childbirth, how long would she have stayed his wife? How long would he have been interested? I don't know. But fate had other plans for her. But she made her mark. I think that's what it's coming down to here, making your mark, however long it lasts, no matter how hard the work is at the moment. Becoming better than your enemy, becoming better than the opponent that is also in the same situation, that wants the same situation. But without fighting for it, make a commitment and release that to the universe to make it happen. These two didn't want to let go of each other. The Eight of Hearts and the Ace of Clubs. The Eight of Hearts indicates the Eight of Cups. So it's moving away from the standard of what has been set into a new standard, perhaps. Stepping away from how it's always been done to make a new stand and to forge a new path, perhaps. Or leaving behind something that you've worked hard for, knowing that it's not working out that way, trying something new, trying a new approach, trying a new tact, and then making movement towards it, being inspired to move towards it. And that's what happened here. Jane Seymour could see what was happening in court, and she wanted to do it differently, and it worked out for her. And it may have continued to work out for her had she not died after childbirth. So it's sort of coming down to, you make your own mark in life, you make your own decisions in life, but what happens after that fact, after it's done, it's entirely up to the fate, of course, or what have you. But you make the commitment, you change it sometimes, and move forward with the best of intentions to make exactly what it is that you want to happen. But you have influence, and you had influence then, and you still have influence now. So don't give up on what it is that you want, and don't doubt yourself. Rising up the ladder, getting higher than what you are, rising above the circumstances that you're finding yourself in, because it's necessary. News definitely coming through here. News on the grapevine. Gossip, perhaps. News that is you've been waiting for is finally coming through. It's also group work here. Brainstorming, sharing ideas is coming through here, but verbally. Restrictions again come through here. You may feel as though your hands are tied, but not entirely. There's always a way out. There's always a way out. There's still freedom to move around here. And you may feel as though you're stuck in a situation, but something is going to change to release you and bring about what it is that you've been wanting and waiting for. And then you can move on to bigger and better things, even if it might mean leaving behind what you've already accomplished. Obviously, for some reason, it's not working out that way, so maybe now it's time to reorganize that and realize that something needs to be changed. Took a while for Jane Seymour to become pregnant, so maybe that was a burden for her as well, to keep her place where she needed to be with King Henry VIII, because that was her destiny. That was what she needed to do. Once she married him, it was her duty to provide a male heir. And of course you had this guy breathing down your neck. You breathing down someone's neck. I don't know who it was, or why you were so focused on this, but it was part of your destiny as well. So it's sort of, you put her in that position, and well, you sort of whispered in King Henry VIII's ear, "Hey, look over there. She's a bit of all right, Jane Seymour. Have a bit of a squiz at her." Transformation comes through here. Release, transformation, judgment. Healing. Physically, mentally, spiritually. Everything comes through here. Things are healing for you. Things are soothing themselves over. And projections. Sometimes we see ourselves in the face of another, and that face tells us the darker side of us, and we project our ideas onto others, and they project their ideas onto us. So it's all a matter at the moment of whose ideas do you want to go with, whose ideas and whose thoughts are controlling you at the moment. Are they yours or somebody else's? So have a think about that as well as you progress towards your commitment, because you don't want to make decisions based on someone else's ideas of what they think you should be doing or thinking. So make your decisions based on what it is that you want, and I think go your own way, and you might be led towards this, or maybe someone else is urging you forward onto this one. But if it's what you want and you are in control of that, and that's a good thing, a message from Lady Jane Seymour, even if you were not in direct contact with her. It is, do what it is that you feel right, and whether or not you're being urged to do it, make a stand on it and make it fit you, make it work for you. And I think perhaps that will lead more towards success than anything else at the moment. So hopefully that's helped you, Belinda, made sense to you, answered your question. And until next time, so many blessings.